What are you drinking, Kyle?
Well, I am drinking a bottle of Smoke Wagon straight bourbon whiskey. Smoke Wagon, you probably heard of them. They're put out by the Nevada H&C Distilling Company. This company started back in the early 2000s. They actually have a distillery in Vegas, and they distill vodka. They distill Silver Dollar vodka, but they also started a line of bourbon. They source all their bourbon from MGP or Midwest Grain Products that a lot of bourbon sourced from with their distilleries in Indiana and Kansas and various places. But they came on the scene in 2016, and initially it was super hard to find, and it was it was almost like an allocated find, and I actually found them couple of times. I was traveling to Nevada for work, and hey, I got a bottle of Smoke Wagon. It's like this new thing, and then they got a lot of distribution deals, and now you find it everywhere. But one of the things they're known for is a really creative bottle. The Smoke Wagon in itself, I was reading about it a little bit, and I don't know, dumb me, I'm thinking Smoke Wagon, maybe there's smoke going through the barrels, and no, it's the 1873 pistol called the Smoke Wagon, and they've got two of them on the front of it, so it's more like a Western theme. But yeah, good stuff. I just bought an entry level one, but a lot of them are pretty hot. I mean, this is just an entry level one, and it's 112 proof, but they've got a really good uncut, unfiltered version that's a lot hotter, and yeah, it's good stuff.
Cool. I'm going fairly simple. I've got a old fashioned made with Brugal Anejo, so a Dominican Republic rum. I think the best selling rum for the Dominican Republic. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, but smooth and tight.
Is it sweeter, or is it?
No, it's pretty dry. It's a Anejo, so kind of an aged rum, but I've talked about this before, that Spanish style, and actually read a little bit more about this over the last week. The oldest rums in the Caribbean were British rums, and they used like pot stills, kind of like they used to use to distill Scotch. I guess they do still single malt scotches. And so if you've had like Myers rum from Jamaica or any of the British rums, they tend to be really heavy and dark and molassesy and all of that. Well, the Spanish actually started distilling rums later, but they use column stills that are kind of a continuous process and makes a really clean, light product. And so Cuban, Puerto Rican, Dominican rums all have that, so again, think about like a Bacardi Gold, very, very light, very smooth, not a lot of heavy flavor. And then the third thing is those, like I had the Haitian rum last time when we talked, Rum Agricole. And the difference with the Haitian rum is that instead of being made out of molasses like everything else, they're actually made out of straight cane juice. And that's why the Haitian rums, or the Rum Agricole, the French style, has kind of like a grassy flavor to it. Well, timely topic. We thought maybe we'd talk a little bit about something that might or might not be political. Federal Reserve cut its interest rate by 0.5 point this week. And, the stated goal of the Federal Reserve and other central banks is to remain above the fray of politics, but it's kind of hard to avoid that you're going to cut rates in an election year, that it's going to have an effect. And so I wonder what your take on that was and what you thought about that.
Yeah, I know we were generally thinking of, talking about some of the economic factors at play. And I did spend a fair amount of time reading the different platforms of each candidate. I thought that was a good exercise, just understanding what drives the various platforms.
You're going way deeper than me. What did you find out?
Well, one thing I found, I don't want to take this down a different tangent than you started with the Fed, so I don't want to take us off topic, but I got down a bit of a rabbit hole because one of the things the Harris campaign talked about and they references Project 2025 a couple of times. And then on their website where they talk about their policies, they keep hammering home, Trump, Project 25, Trump. And then so okay, what is this Project 25? What's this about? I'd heard rumblings about it. Well, it's a group of like 400 conservative thinkers that sat down and came up with like a detailed platform. I mean, there's like 4 central themes, but there's like, here's 175 things we think need to be done. The same outfit, it's Heritage Foundation, put out this thing in 1981 called the Mandate for Leadership. It was the same kind of a drill where they put together all the policy procedures. And then Reagan wound up adopting like 60% of them. So a lot of it is economic stuff. I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff, a lot of the social stuff is particularly objectionable by some on the left, because they talk about family and some of the value stuff that, the left has an issue with. But, a lot of the economic stuff it's just weird to me because they're trying to stick it on Trump, and Trump is somehow distancing himself in some ways from this Project 2025. But if you look at the economic stuff, I mean, it seemed pretty spot on, and obviously these people gave ideas to Reagan, and a lot of the things that became Reagan policy over the years, he didn't all just think up on his own. I'm sure he used a think tank. And similarly, I was researching on the left, there was a big one in 2017 called the People's Platform. And that included a bunch of different social programs. And it was the same kind of thing. Like, here's a laundry list of stuff. I don't think any administration adopted 100% of it, but they pick and choose, and it's kind of like all these candidates, hey, tell me your opinion on 50,000 different things. They got to be pulling it from things like this, right? I mean, they're not just thinking a policy about every possible thing under the sun every night, right?
Well, yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot to unpack there. The basic point, 100%. I don't care who you are, you're running for president. You have not looked at every issue and have not thought of everything. So you're going to outsource a lot of that stuff. And I think that the reality is that is what Project 2025 is. I think it may be even more speculative. It's a wish list, right? You ask a bunch of people, both policy scholars and conservative political or social policy leaders. Hey, if we could give you anything, it's the classic, we're going to give you the magic wand. What do you want to do? I think that, and so to your point, right? Like, I think it's interesting that Trump is now like, oh, I don't know anything about it. I haven't read that. And he was really trying to distance himself because there was a lot of blowback. And I think it was predominantly on the social issues, a very classic playbook, but a very social conservative. That's at least half of it. I didn't read the thing, but that's clearly a big part of it. And so, how to interpret that? I think it's kind of funny. During the debate, people were like, one of the things that they said they should have fact checked her on is that she tried to tie him to Project 2025 when he said he doesn't support it. Well, it's like, well, yeah, but a lot of your people that you hang out with wrote the thing. People that you're looking at for cabinet positions are supporters of it. So, yeah, you can't just say you completely walk away from it, I don't think.
Yeah, I guess my thought was going the opposite direction. I mean, a lot of it made a lot of sense. Now, yeah, and I guess that's what I think they're trying to pin it on is like, this is an extreme agenda. If he does all this stuff, he'll be the most extreme president. Well, but nobody's ever taken all of the policy recommendations of, one outfit, so, but yeah, I guess that's kind of the strategy is, well, he's going to do 175 things and they're all going to be bad. That's, I'm sure, what they're trying to go after.
I will say, I think that the fact that there is a document that tries to encompass conservative economic theory as well as conservative approach to social policy issues is in some ways part of our problem. My words, not yours, but I look at some of the European countries with the multiple parties. Like, I consider myself pretty liberal on social issues, but I tend to be more conservative on economic issues. Not completely. There's a couple things that I really disagree with, but like I'm kind of not completely at home in either party. Like my economic policies, you know, if we're being really straight with all of my really good Democrat friends, they might not like how, I'm in favor of, low taxation, right? But like I'm certainly not comfortable with the conservative social agenda. So like kind of lost between both worlds. Just think it's an interesting marriage that we have in this country. You've got those two impulses, and I don't know, this isn't going to make for good listening. me rambling. You have to edit this out.
No, it's good. You're right. I want to get back to the issue, but if your ideology is more important than your love of family or country, like the political parties and the candidates are a means to the end. They're not like the party platform isn't what we're doing this for. I mean, it's
right.
And I think sometimes that becomes, like the person or the agenda becomes more important than, the big picture.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I'm looking for something to argue.
So back to the Fed, though, and I went down a rabbit hole. I apologize, but
no,
back to the Fed. I guess if I'm putting words in your mouth, this is a sign that the economy's improving and inflation's going down, and they can lower the interest. Is that what you're thinking?
I would say that? Yeah. I would say, yeah. The fact that it was a rate cut and that it was 50 basis points rather than 25, they're putting a pretty big stake in the ground and saying that we're not as worried about the economy. We're feeling good about things right now. That inflation has come under control. I think it's a good question. So this is kind of off topic, but not completely off topic. I read somebody made a political post on Facebook, and it was interesting. There was a little bit of a dialogue, and somebody disagreed and was kind of sticking up for the person that I saw posted an anti-Trump message, and the other person defended. But the one thing that the woman said that really caught me, and honestly, Kyle, if you can illuminate this for me, it would help me a ton. She made some comment like, I just want Trump back because we need change because this country is falling apart and things are terrible. It was, something along those lines. And I've got to say, I mean, so this might be all of my privileges in life rolled up into one statement, but I look around and it doesn't seem that bad to me. The world doesn't seem that bad to me. The country doesn't seem that bad to me. Am I that much out of touch, or is there really a crisis in this country that I'm not? I know we can go issue by issue that there's things that you want to fix or that people are unhappy with, but this does not feel like a disaster to me.
Yeah, I don't think you're gonna sense that. I drive down the road and I get a coffee at McDonald's and I drive over here to the cleaners and everything looks fine. I get it. I mean, I haven't had any bombs lobbed at me driving back and forth to McDonald's. I haven't seen zombies running around. I haven't seen, anything strikingly bad. I'm with you to the extent that I'm hopeful about where we are. But I also see things not far below the surface or things that you read about that are really concerning. I'm more of an optimist than that. I don't think I would characterize like, the country's falling apart. I think that's a bit of hyperbole, but I'm really worried about some of the major issues that I just don't think are going to get addressed. And I think honestly, to some degree, people are banking on, hey, things are good. The stock market's up. All is well. When there's fundamentals of our economy, there's things like whether it's immigration, whether it's spending, whether it's the debt that, I think are major hazards. But then, to your point, the Fed reduced the rates. Hey, out of the woods, right? Everything's good.
I think, again, I think that if I'm looking for a fight, I don't think I'm going to get it here because I think that we kind of are aligned on this. I think that, I guess that's what I would say. I would acknowledge that there are problems that are germane to the economy that are not being addressed that we need to talk about. Like I'm down with that. It's partly the rhetoric just makes me shake my head, but part of it, I find that the America's going to hell is like I just don't like that message. But I'm wondering, like, it does resonate with people, and that's my question. Like, I don't think you feel, again, putting your words back in your mouth. You don't feel like there are real issues that we got to deal with and things like that, but not like it's all going to hell in a handbasket. But it seems to me that there are people that really do feel that way, and I'm wondering, am I that much in the minority? Am I that insulated in my little bubble here, or are we okay, but we've got concerns on the horizon, which is where I lean. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and some of it depends on what you're watching all day, what your world perspective is. I mean, if honestly, this is part of why I don't watch any television news of any kind, because no matter if you're right or left, you turned on any of these shows, I mean, you'd want to shoot yourself. I mean,
Yeah.
people are shouting at each other. Everything's horrible. No, I agree with you. I'm really concerned about a lot of things, and we'll talk about it. But I think part of it is my worldview too. I believe in a God that's in control, and no situation here is too big or powerful for him. And not to say I'm not, it's not to be apathetic, but at the same time, like, the government's not my provider. So,
Yeah.
I'm interested, but I'm not going to lose sleep too much about it.
I hear you there. I don't know. It's interesting to me to, like, I wonder, like, objectively what one would say is, again, not that they're not legitimate problems, but boy, it just doesn't seem. I will say that one of the things that I heard, I thought this was a reasonable point. They said it kind of depends on where you are in life. If you're middle aged and you're looking down the barrel of retirement, and your number one thing that you're thinking about is growing your 401k, and the stock market's looking pretty good, it doesn't feel like things are a crisis. If you're 28 and looking at interest rates and going to buy a house, and you're not ever going to buy a house because of interest rates, I can see how that, I'm trying to acknowledge that I'm in a different place in life, but it still just doesn't feel like a disaster. And
that's a really good point, because a lot of it depends on where you are in life.
yeah, the thing is that to say nothing's wrong and everything's fine is obviously wrong. I'm not saying that. I think also to say, your country's just fallen apart and everything's gone to hell, like, that doesn't feel very actionable to me. The hard part is getting to, and we would disagree about those specific issues, but how do you focus on those issues that matter rather than just saying everything's fine or everything's destroyed? No, we're okay, but we need to address this, and this. It just, if you want to get a little bit burnt out on politics, to me, it's that, like, looking at the real problems, there's not a lot of points in that, or so it doesn't seem.
Well, and that's part of my issue. And okay, I lean right. So I'm not complete, I'm not a Chat GPT. Well, I don't know. Chat GPT is probably leaning left, but I'm kidding. But it may be. Who knows what it's leaning? But I'm not entirely objective when I look at the two platforms, probably. But at the same time, the part I struggle with the Harris administration is it's a lot of generalities, and it's very light. And one of the things that Project 2025 digs into a lot is about administrative rulemaking. and how, in the absence of a clear, nationally articulated policy, all these agencies create like a life of their own. I mean, they're out there making, various rules that they're not beholden to congressional oversight or anything else. And my fear is that there's a lot of things, and we've seen that to agree with the Biden administration, if the national policies aren't clearly articulated, how much regulation and thinking for themselves occurs at the agency level? I don't know.
Well, I mean, let me just say that I agree with that. There's a couple places where I think that there's like enormous power wielded in our government that people are not thoughtful about. That's one of them, is at the administrative or agency level, kind of policy and regulations side that aren't law. The other is the staff of Congress. But the reason that you've got that much power in that state, like I think that the Project 2025 people, if they're worried about heavy regulation, heavy government, part of your problem there is that you got a Congress that is completely non-functional.
Yeah.
And so the laws that they pass are often unintelligible or meaningless in what they're saying. And so I don't know. I'm not taking up for every bureaucrat's thing, but I got to believe that somebody who works in the administration of the FCC understands a little bit more about communication and bandwidth allocation and what demand is than, Fred, the congressman from North Dakota. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I don't know anybody from North Dakota. I'm just, what I'm saying? Like you need experts running things too. So there's a trade-off to what you're saying.
Yeah. I don't know. I think my biggest thing when I read her platform, more than anything though, is just like, there's nothing really, and I guess if the Fed's lowering the interest rates and your message is inflation's going away, well, then you don't need to address inflation. But I feel like everything in her policy agenda is spending money on stuff. There's nothing in the agenda like, we're going to cut spending in this area. We're going to look at, in Trump's agenda, there's clear things about, now you can disagree on how they're going to cut the spending, but there's nothing about cutting. And the other thing is I find is there's nothing in her agenda that really talks to things that would be beneficial to inflation, like energy or like immigration. Immigration is another great point. If immigration's wide open, that's an inflationary influence. And so I guess bottom line, it's just like, and she had that sit down with Oprah and some guy was like, well, what specifically are you going to do to reduce the inflation? And there's not really an answer. Now, if your platform is, it's not a problem, well, that's one avenue.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I guess getting back to the original topic, and I don't really have a point behind it other than that it's complicated when politics mixes with economics. In a perfect world, you would have your Federal Reserve. Honestly, I would have term limits on Supreme Court justices, but I would have Federal Reserve governors like completely immune from politics and reappointment, because you just don't want those people thinking about how are we going to affect the next election. Something I heard this week was that back in like the 60s and 70s, Johnson-Nixon administration, both of them were trying to get the Fed to, I want you to cut interest rates here. I want you to do that, trying to really politicize it. And that just doesn't work that well. One of the things is that economic indicators, it all lags. Like, okay, so they cut rates 0.5%. And if you're thinking about buying a house, that's good news. But your mortgage company probably didn't cut the offered rates by 0.5% on Friday. It's going to take a little while for that to trickle through. And then you might be able to afford a house that you couldn't otherwise, but you're going to have to put that under contract and buy it. So you're months at a minimum before an interest rate cut really starts to play out. And this is, again, another day's topic, but politicians on both sides taking credit for economic wins and blaming their opponent for economic problems when the cycle of that operates independent of the election cycle. Not independent of, but separate from.
And on that note, and again, I'm no economist. If you saw my college transcripts, you might question whether I even really graduated from college. So, I mean, I did, but I'm not the smartest guy. I get that. But the thing is, though, it seems like if you move too quick to cut the rate, one of the benefits of a higher rate is you're decreasing demand. So
Mhm.
one would think that would help maybe lower the pricing for these first time homeowners. But if you've got a supply problem in housing and then you lower the rate, aren't you just going to exacerbate the supply problem already? And you could possibly like that lag. Okay, hey, I got a half a point interest rate down, but the going rate cost for a house just went up 50 grand because now more people are willing to, I mean, there is a
Sure.
tricky element there. And I think when you think about first time homeowners, I mean, just the cost. I mean, I like it, the fact that our house went up in value, but oh my gosh, I mean, houses have doubled around here, you know? I
Yeah.
don't know how somebody does it if they're a kid out of young married couple or something like that.
Well, and back to that. Yeah. If you're in your 50s and you own your home and you're working on your 401k,
Yeah.
feels pretty good. If you're
Right.
trying to think about how we're going to buy a house, it's a different deal. It's interesting. This is a case where I think that these impacts they don't follow the normal lines of our political discourse, which I think is interesting because so much we manage to make follow the lines of our political discourse. And I think that we even cram stuff in. I'm well, I'm talking in circles. The post production on this episode is going to be a real challenge. But
Just going to throw it away, all of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
but just that marriage of conservative political views and conservative social values versus the other, like it makes for strange bedfellows. You wind up in weird
Yeah.
places on some public policy issues. And the one we're going to run out of time on this, but here's the one that I think we should put on the list because write it down. I agree with JD Vance in a very narrow in a very narrow way that the issue of declining fertility rate is a huge economic issue and potential problem for our country. That I agree with 100%. But this is an example of a thing that's kind of hard to talk about because we already drew the battle lines. And I don't think our dialogue is very well equipped to deal with this. There are a lot of reasons that birth rates are going down, and a lot of those are economic reasons. People are like, I can't afford to have kids.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a whole it's another episode all its own. It'd be
Oh,
worth
yeah.
you looking
That'd be a
into
good
and
one.
reading a little bit about. It's a fascinating issue to me.
Okay, Ken, let me pull on and that's a good one, but I think, like you said, that's a half a bottle of whiskey and bourbon in another podcast. But um, okay, what do you think about this proposal getting batted around about taxing unrealized capital gains?
Wow. It's a good question. I understand the reason why people would want to tax huge unrealized capital gains. I guess I can't imagine that it would be possible to do it in a way that's meaningful. And it would be a great reason for people to stash their wealth offshore. So I'm opposed to that.
Yeah, that to me, the biggest threat would be, what does that do to the stock market, other avenues of investment? I mean, I guess like you said, it would encourage people to seek investments that are far from the public eye, I guess.
And the real money that you like, if you were going to get some money, you're not like the money to get is not like Phil who built a metalworking business and he's got 100 employees. Like that's not the guy to get the money from. It's a tech bazillionaire that's got all of this wealth and when you're in that class of money, it's easy for you to move stuff and hide stuff. So
Yeah, and I was researching it a bit. It was a Elizabeth Warren proposal. I didn't see it on Kamala Harris's platform. Her platform does talk about a tax on billionaires, which the way they characterize it is similar, essentially like doing annual assessment on the wealth of a billionaire. It's saying, here you owe X million dollars.
I don't know. This is where I'm going to get bounced from the Democrat Party, but any such proposal like that stuff's really hard to do in a fair way. And the people that most ought to be paying that are the ones most capable of dodging any kind of a scheme like that.
Yeah.
Here's an unpopular opinion that you won't hear on anybody's platform. The estate tax is the place to make a big move. And people think that's horrible. Oh, it's the death tax. Well, the biggest knock on taxation, other than being hard to collect, is that it disincents investment and things like that, right? But you're not making any investment choices when you're dead anyway. And the truth of the matter is that in my mind, if you're a successful business and wealth creator, you ought to be able to pass to your family a reasonable amount of wealth. Like, I'm for the exception to the estate tax being high enough so that we don't have to sell family farms and yada, yada. But on some level, I don't know how many self-made millionaires you've known or people that have built business. And I don't know how many kids of self-made millionaires who built big businesses you've known. But in general, the founder of the business is the one who's the wealth creator, and the kid's the one that's been spoiled all their life. It's going to blow the money. And so why not tax it and take it for the government? There's an unpopular opinion for you, but estate tax, yeah, make it so you can take care of your family, that you can pass on some wealth. But on some level, is it even sensible to pass that kind of intergenerational wealth down?
What is that? This is where we need a researcher on standby. What is that line they use about, like, hard times make really hard and resilient people, who in turn create wealth and then bless others, and then those people become softer? I mean, that's essentially it. I don't know. There's some line like that, but it's kind of true. Like, the greatest generation comes up and comes from nothing, and they make a great business and they take care of their family, and then the kids get it and turn into coke addicts,
Yes. Yeah, it's interesting because, like, that boils people's bloods, the death tax. But really, like, all right, if you're really good at creating wealth, we're gonna give you all the runway you want while you're alive. But not sure we need to pass that huge amount of wealth down without some social interest to kids that aren't going to do any better with it.
Yeah, a lot of people will say, well, why the Republicans, like, why are you against, like, well, screw the billionaires, take their money. Like, you're not going to be a billionaire, so what do you care if they tax the crap out of them? And I feel like there's a moral element to it too, though. There's like this fairness principle that people really struggle with. But I think the left on the other side, when they think of fairness, it's like, well, it's unfair that this guy's a billionaire, so I ought to have. I mean, I'm putting words in people's mouth.
Yeah, but I think there's a middle road that looks at that. You know that I'm not of the, well, he doesn't deserve his money, we should take it. But there is something to be said for the fact that wealth was created in this country with a set of laws and a set of protections and a court system that validates contracts, that makes it possible to create that level of wealth. How you do it, what the mechanics are open to discussion. But yeah, I think that there's a valid interest for the public to have a higher rate of taxation for people that make phenomenal wealth, because they made it because they're in this country and because of the protections that this country offers. I'm not really talking about taxing the hell out of Carlos Slim in Mexico. I'm saying you built your business here on the backs of our infrastructure. Your trucks ran on our roads. You know what I mean? Your private plane landed at an airport that the taxpayers built.
Yeah. Well, isn't Carlos Slim actually, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to fact check you, but isn't Carlos Slim somebody that you would want to tax? He's a Mexican billionaire.
I would love to tax it, but I don't see a way that you could go after it.
Oh, okay.
What I'm saying
you
is
are
that,
saying I'm sorry, I missed your point. Can you say it again?
Yeah, my point is just this, that I can see how somebody would say, wow, it's unfair to tax billionaires more because, they worked hard and they made their money. And I agree with that to a degree, but I'm just saying they made their money here in this country. They made their money. They didn't do it alone. They did it through their employees. Like I said, their trucks ran on our roads when it was delivering their crap. Their private plane landed on an airport that the taxpayers paid for. There's the people that have that kind of wealth are doing so. They're able to create that because there's an infrastructure that's paid for by the taxpayers of this country.
Oh, you're saying we don't want to take his money. Take it, though, before he gives it to the kids.
Yeah.
Which,
Or take his money if you can figure out a way to do it fairly. I'm just saying that, yeah, I'm kind of in favor of a pretty high progressive tax at the top end of wealth in some form or another. How you get it, trying to tax unrealized capital gains seems like a fool's errand to me. That seems like a really difficult thing to do fairly. But the idea of taking a really big tax bill from the people that have been most successful in our country, yeah, morally, that's where I think we should be. And I think the estate tax is actually the least disruptive of those taxes.
well, I mean, a lot of the really wealthy elite are liberal. I think what we ought to do is just say, hey, if you guys would like to donate some of your money for the federal tax code, I'm sure people, hey, George Soros, if you'd like to donate some of your wealth, I'm sure the government would be happy to take it.
Like a check here if you want to pay an extra million with this year's return.
Exactly. Yeah, they're good.
Maybe. Hey, maybe as we wrap up, a kind of a maybe sort of a circuitous episode, I do want to call out. We took the step this week of kind of going public on Facebook with friends and family that
Yeah.
have had a chance to look at this. I know I've had a number of folks that have commented and responded on Facebook. I just wanted to say that I'm so grateful that you would listen. People said they listened to multiple episodes. I mean, that's a statement. You know, I figured we were probably in the one and done club for people.
Yeah.
But it is really meaningful. And again, I don't think it's that there's particular brilliance here. I think if people are finding something that they're enjoying, what I really think it is our express intent to talk about topics that seem to bring people to blows in a non fist fighting sort of way.
Yeah. And I think we're going to work on some possible ways of contacting us, but certainly if you post a comment on Facebook or any of the places, or those of you that know us, send us a note. Like I said, we'll get a way to contact us in the future. But as you found from this, I think one of the things that we want to do more of is get more focused on topics that we can explore. And I mean, if Kent and I had our way, we'd each have a bottle of booze and we'd spend about 24 hours. We would cover the world's topics, but we'd probably go in a lot of circles. So, but if you got any ideas, let us know. We'd love to talk about what you're thinking.
Well, again, I'm going to take it not as an endorsement of us, but maybe a little bit of a vote for the sentiment of this whole idea that reasonable people who care about the country, but more importantly, care about each other, can have civil dialogue and maybe come up with the kind of common sense things that can work up the middle, and we can come to more
having a country where we're able to talk to each other is priceless. And I think more than any policy, more than anything that could be done governmentally, having friends and family that you could cherish and not want to, beat each other up because we differ. That's what we're after. I think we're all after that.
That statement stands alone. I think the other thing, again, not to beat this horse, but when it's so angry, it also, so there's people like us that like to get in and bat this stuff around, but there's far more people that are truly disengaged because they hate it. They hate arguing about this. They hate the stuff. But the problem with that is that we need their voice. We need their vote. We need intelligent, informed people engaged in politics rather than
Yeah.
just like torchbearers. And one of the problems with the dialogue is that it chases people away and they just check out when actually we need more moderate people kind of standing up and pounding the moderate drum. Is that a thing?
Yeah. A moderate drum. That sounds may not be as interesting as the other drums. No, that's great.